Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. Today is just a short video. I'm trying to make some meals that are both healthy and low cost, and I want to do some meal prep on Sunday so I have an easy week of cooking. And I'm planning just a few simple basic meals that I'll be kind of mixing up a little bit throughout the week. And I'm starting by prepping this sweet potato. I like to make these on the weekend, and then I just put them in a container in the fridge, and it makes for super easy meals. I generally eat these for breakfast, but sometimes I've had them for dinner as well, and I just add it with a protein, and it's just so easy. And I'm just coming off of last week's video where everything was so easy because I had prepped all of those ingredients, and so I'm very inspired to do the same thing again. I'm planning for just a few meals, and then I'll have some variations on those meals. And it does look like my sweet potato was getting a little bit old. You can see they're on a couple of pieces, but that's okay. It's still going to taste delicious. For the majority of my breakfast, I think I'm going to do a breakfast scramble. And I started this morning with just 2 eggs and added a little bit of salt. I was thinking I would use up the leftover tomatoes and onions from my meal plan last week because I have just a few of those, and so I'm going to add those to this. The cost of eggs where I'm at right now in Irvine is a little under 20 cents each at Sam's Club to almost 30 cents each. So I guess I'll go for a cost in the middle of that at about 25 cents each. So this would be about 50 cents of eggs. And then for cheese, I'm actually using a lactose-free cheese, but normally you would just use the regular block of pepper jack here. Both Walmart and Aldi have great prices on pepper jack, and they're about 25 cents an ounce, and you can get away with using just an ounce here. It really doesn't take much. And then I'm going to add some diced tomatoes and also some diced white onions. I really love the way white onions taste in a scramble, but they do need to be cooked down a bit, so I'm just going to cook those on the side of this. I do love pepper jack in scrambled eggs. It's one of my favorite cheeses for this. And since we're talking about pepper jack, I did want to remind you of another meal that I made that we could have made with the ingredients from last week, and that's migas. And you just start by frying up some of these shells, and then you add those to your egg. But before I added the eggs, I cooked some diced onions in the bottom of the pan. I did this, I think, back in 2022 on my channel, so it was quite a long time ago. But you just add those to the eggs, and then you add a little bit of cheese. And pepper jack is my favorite in this, but some people might prefer, like a creamy American cheese or a cheddar, but I do like pepper jack. And then I added in some fresh cilantro and just a touch more cheese, and then covered it so that it would melt on top. And again, this is a very inexpensive meal. It doesn't look inexpensive, but if you watched last week's video, you know how inexpensive this is. We spent $11, and then we made all of these different variety of foods, and I forgot to include this in there. And I also wanted to say that some people will not want to have this many tortillas. It just happens that I liked the tortillas in the migas and also on the side, but I'm sure some people would want to skip the side of tortillas. I love this meal. It is one of my favorites. It just all goes so well together, and adding the refried beans makes this such a substantial breakfast. However, I will say that this is one of those meals that I would easily eat for dinner as well. Anyway, let's get back to the breakfast that I'm making now. Again, this is just a simple one with eggs and onions that I had left over and tomatoes and a little bit of pepper jack cheese. And you might want to add a couple of pieces of toast here, but I'll just be eating it like this. I'm trying to cut out bread this week. Just kind of having a clean week of eating. And I just love how buttery these sweet potatoes taste, just plain by themselves. I love the pepper jack. Obviously you could put these into a tortilla as well if you wanted to, but they're delicious just like this. But after I was eating this, I realized that this was quite low calorie because I didn't add any pieces of toast, and I wasn't using a full ounce of cheese. So next time I make this, I'm going to add more cheese and definitely add some more eggs to bulk this up a bit. Due to my work schedule, I like to eat a bigger breakfast and then a very small dinner. I do love having these sweet potatoes in the fridge so that I can make some super easy meals. And I'm going to go ahead and make a pot of white rice. We do all love having this in the fridge. It just makes for some easy meals to put together. At least my son Justin and I always use this rice. So I've cleaned this and washed it. Love this rice cooker. I've had this for a long time and it always makes perfect rice. This is definitely one of my favorite kitchen appliances. So I'm going to make that rice and then I'll be able to make some stir fries during the week for my lunches and if I want for my dinners. I showed you this container last week that I like to use in the summer, so I thought I would go ahead and cut up some of the vegetables that I have in my fridge, and I can use these in stir fries. I can also use them in my breakfast scrambles, and if I get to it, I can make some salads with this. I always buy the vegetables that are on a really good deal, and last week Walmart had these bell peppers for 49 cents, so I grabbed one because I knew it would last in the fridge until this week. So I thought I would just cut this up, and I thought that this would be delicious in my breakfast scrambles, and I also occasionally like to add these to my stir fries. When I add these to an omelet or scrambled eggs, I like them to be very small. That way they cook quickly and they kind of spread evenly throughout the dish. And I think I'll go ahead and keep some bigger pieces as well, just in case I decide that I want to make some fajitas or something like that. Then I have the option to cut them in the strips. So I've got my green peppers, and then I've got some fresh diced tomatoes cut up. I'm going to use those in my egg stir fry, but I'll also use those in salads maybe later during the end of the week. And then I cut up some green onions. I only cut up a few at a time. And then I also cut up some celery. I got a really great deal on celery a couple weeks back, and that's just been sitting on my fridge. I'm going to be happy to use that this week in my stir fries. I love celery in stir fries. I'm going to go ahead and prepare some of this tofu just to get it ready for my stir fries. This is my protein of choice for stir fries. Obviously, if you want to use chicken or beef or pork, you can just cut it into very small pieces and you can easily cook it up in the stir fry. I'm just going to cut my tofu in small cubes. Sometimes people will ask me how to use tofu. Once you open the package, then you want to place it in water because it needs it to keep it fresh, and it'll only last a few days in the fridge. I would say probably up to 4 or 5 days max. And you can cut it in these cubes or you can cut it into steaks, for lack of a better word, and you can grill it, you can bake it, you can put it in the air fryer. I typically like to air fry mine, which is where I put those cubes that I just showed you into the air fryer. Sometimes I won't put them in the air fryer and I'll just put them directly into the pan of stir fry in with a little sesame oil, and they will become chewy the longer they cook. If I want a crispy and chewy piece of tofu, then what I do is I roll it in a little bit of cornstarch. If you want to know more about cooking tofu, I used it quite a bit in an extreme budget video where I did 9 meals for $5. I can definitely link that in this video, and there were quite a few different applications for the tofu there. I think I even made some tofu bacon, which turned out fabulous, which I never would have thought. But anyway, back to this. I use an extra firm, high protein tofu that I get from Trader Joe's. I think it's $2.99 for the block, and I get 5 servings of extra high protein at 59 cents each, almost 60 cents each. That is so inexpensive. You can basically add that with some rice, carrots, and onions and have a delicious stir fry for less than $1. Okay, I've got some broccoli that I needed to use up also. So I washed this and cut it into some small pieces, the bite-sized pieces that I like in my meals, and I'm putting that on the bottom. Some people will use the bottom for ice because this is actually meant to be like a condiment tray. They'll put the ice down there and then they can set this out and it'll be lasting for a long time if you're entertaining or serving your family, like a barbecue or something like that. But I'm using this a little bit differently so that I can just pick it up out of the fridge, set it on the stove, and make my meal as fast as possible. And this is a little container of cilantro that I have in a bit of water just to keep it fresh. And I'm going to put that in there also. I had plenty of food at home, but I did run to H Mart because I wanted to get some greens and I wanted some bok choy, some baby bok choy. My son loves this, and so I wanted to get some for him. And I also wanted to make about half of this in my breakfast and my lunches. I also picked up this lettuce, which I think that was overkill because I probably won't get to that until next week, but maybe I can fit in a couple salads at the end of the week. And for my greens, I decided on the red Swiss chard, and this wasn't a very good deal, but it looked so good to me, I just decided to get it anyway. And I was very pleased that green onions were the same price that they are at Wholesome Choice at 33 cents a bundle. And they had something new this time at my H Mart. They had this bar with marinated meats. You could just go in there and pick up some of the marinated chicken. It would make a relatively inexpensive stir fry if you did it that way. But I got these bananas. I'll use those for eating, and then I'll put some in the freezer for my smoothies. I got the carrots, and then the rest you've already seen. So it is Monday morning and I have to make my breakfast, and I also have to make my lunch. I'm going to start with my lunch. This is the rice that I made yesterday. I just put this in the fridge. I'm going to get this out. I'm going to have 1 cup of rice in my container for lunch with my stir fry. And today I decided to cook some of the tofu in the air fryer first, and I'm making enough for 2 servings so that it'll be ready for tomorrow's meal as well. And again, I've got my container next to my stove, and I'm just going to go ahead and do my stir fry here. It's going to make it super easy, and I'm cooking on a high heat with just a touch of sesame oil. And I always start with my celery and my onions first because they take just a little bit longer to cook, but I'm cooking super fast because it is at a high heat and I want to keep a lot of the moisture in the vegetables. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my broccoli and my carrots now. And I'm not using white onions, but I will be using the green onions. So I'm going to add those in now. I could have probably even added them in a little bit later. You just barely want to have those cooked. And then I'm just going to quickly fry this together until they're just a little bit tender, but they do still have their body to them. I'm adding my tofu in from the air fryer and just a little bit more sesame oil, and that's soy sauce. And then I'm adding a small amount of my chili garlic sauce just to give it a touch of heat. I love this with my stir fries. It goes great because I'm going to be eating this along with the white rice, and I'm also adding in just a few peanuts. I love to have peanuts in the house specifically for this dish. I love peanuts because they last a really long time. Unlike some other kinds of nuts where they go bad, these I can have this jar open for a really long time and just use, a few at a time, and it works out great. And then I just do a couple more drops on top, and then I'm going to take this in my lunch today. For this dish, I just seasoned with sesame oil, soy sauce, and the chili garlic sauce, but usually I add in maple syrup. I'll make the concoction together in a little container, and then I add it to the dish at the very last minute. And on this day, you'll notice I added some bok choy in there. I had cut up a couple of those heads and added that to my container so I could use that to fry up in a pan to have with my eggs, and also to sometimes add in my stir fry. And here's one of the mornings with my breakfast scramble, and then just a side of the fried bok choy and a little bit of avocado. And for the bok choy, I just cooked it in a pan with just barely any oil, and then topped it with a little soy sauce. And I actually didn't get tired of eggs this week. I had enough variations that it kept my interest in this dish, and I did kind of perfect how I like to have this cooked. I did decide that I liked it best when I would just add the cheese at the very end and then put the top on, and then come back to it and it was all melted, and then I would just slide it onto my plate. I've decided that that's my best way to cook that. So I've basically been showing you what I've been eating all week, and for my dinners I had shakes, and I typically did not add the berries to the shake. I just had bananas and my protein powder and a little bit of flaxseed, but I do love all kinds of fruits and vegetables and spinach and all kinds of things in my smoothie. We have a smoothie season here in our household, and we've just pretty much entered into it because it's just now started getting warm where we're at. It's actually been an unseasonably cool summer so far. We've been in the 70s, but I know that it's supposed to be getting hotter next week, so we're storing up on bananas and all of our ingredients for these, and they're just so delicious, and they're definitely cooling and just very refreshing. In that shot, I was showing some milk, but I always use water with this. And I wanted to show you this picture because it was made with the dragon fruit and it looks so beautiful. I definitely want to buy that again when I see that on sale. And I like to buy an unflavored protein powder because it's the only one that I can find that doesn't have erythritol. And the cheapest place that I've been able to find this unsweetened protein powder has been on Amazon. And in case you missed that, I'm able to make these shakes for between about $1.75 and $2. But I think that that's a pretty good price for something that cools you down in the summer. It's also a great convenience meal, and it tastes like a milkshake, so it feels like you're having a treat. And that concludes this week's video. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I'll see you next week.
Morning has broken, my windows are open. Wanna feel the wind blow through my hair. Which way do I follow? What happens tomorrow? I turn to you and hope you can guide the way. Sometimes I give up, just wanna be on my own. Even in the darkest times, you give me hope. So